Hello, everybody. Sorry for the delay. All right. Let's see. So today we're going to be working on... Why am I so... I'm a little bit lost here. I'm getting lost in my desktop windows. Am I getting too old to use computers? Anyway, so today we're going to be working on the combat log. I was talking about this yesterday in the Discord, trying to figure out what to do. I think I have a plan forward, so we're going to do some interesting stuff. Going to be trying to do some statistics and whatnot, and like some bar graphs and whatnot. So we're going to see how that turns out. It's probably going to be really rough to start, but the whole point of this stream is just to do some exploratory work, see how it does before I put a bunch of effort into like polishing up the presentation of it. So anyway, Alchemortis is still available for play testing, so you can head on over to the Steam page, click request access. You'll get instant access to the playtest. You can also wishlist it while you're there. I'd appreciate that. You could also join on Patreon. If you subscribe at the top tier for at least 1 month, I will send you a Steam key for the full game when Alchemortis launches, and I'll put your name in the in-game Alchemortis credits. So that's all. That's if you subscribe for at least 1 month. So you could subscribe for 1 month and cancel, and those two benefits are locked in right there, those two perks. Of course, I would appreciate it if you considered staying subscribed for longer, but I just want to make it perfectly clear that you don't need to be an active subscriber to get these things. You just need to subscribe at this tier once, and you'll be good. Also, I have my Udemy courses. These are available for sale. They teach you how to build games in the Godot engine, and they're a great way to support me as well. But other than that, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow on Twitch, join the Discord, all that good stuff. Alrighty. Hello, Clickertail. Welcome back. Quackerjack, welcome. Good to see you. Or is that Quakerjack? Who knows? Emerson, welcome. Good to see you. Rin, good to see you again. Welcome back. Ignosum, good to see you. Welcome. Johan, welcome back. I've got a huge craving for playing games right now. Not least Alchemortis playtest, but instead I need to build a shed and dig a hole. Well, that's life, isn't it? Is development on track? Yes, it is. I would say it is. You know, we've got, like I was saying yesterday, like at most like 5.5 months to get the game done. I think that's doable. I think that's reasonable to do. Barring some other major problems coming up, but I don't really see that happening. It'd be nice to have a playback of the comeback with rewind and pause. That would not be very technically difficult. The most difficult thing about that would be to track the crits. So the most difficult thing about that would be to track the random. So when you have items that target other items randomly, or when you have crit chance, which operates off of randomness, that would be the hardest part, because otherwise it's like it's all algorithmic, right? It's like without any randomness, you would be able to perfectly calculate ahead of time just what's on the board, who would win the combat, right? The randomness kind of fudges that a little bit. But if I could just rerun the combat with the same random seed, it would produce the same result every time. So that could be possible. How long did it take for you to become advanced with game dev and Godot? Any advice for a beginner? I've been using Godot since 2017, and I feel like I didn't really start getting good at game development until maybe the past couple of years. So, and I've been building games since I was 14, which was like 2009 or something. So it takes a long time. That's basically what I'm trying to say. It takes a long time. Any advice for a beginner? I think that's my main advice, is like you gotta be prepared for a long haul. I unlocked the courier yesterday. Very nice. Playback is a lot of work. I wonder how common it is to have crits tied to seeds. Well, what I would do is I would just create an isolated seed for that particular combat encounter, and then I would try to figure out a way to propagate that seed throughout all of the abilities, and then have the abilities use that seed. Because like I said, combat is deterministic, right? It's like everything happens in the same order. So given the same starting configuration of the player board and the same starting configuration of the enemy board, as long as the seed is propagated through that combat seed is propagated through the combat, all of the random checks should happen exactly as they did in the real combat, right? Because like the random number generator is deterministic as well, right? It's a pseudo random. It's not true random. So starting with the same state, you will get the same result, assuming you're doing the same operations in the same order. I saw your name in the chat, Ungy Bungy, and I knew already what you were going to be talking about, so welcome back. Budget Jim, hello, good to see you. Had fun with the playtest. Thank you, Evan. I appreciate that. Okay, let me show you what I've done. By the way, I updated to 4.7 release candidate 1 because there were some bugs with rich text labels, which were miraculously fixed in 4.7, so I am making good use of those. But anyway, let me show you the combat log as it exists now. So this combat log has become more of like a combat overview or something. So as I play the game, you can see that the damage numbers are increasing, the status numbers are increasing. The enemy has its own stat area as well. So obviously there's going to need to be a lot of work that goes into this still, but instead of being a timeline of events, this is now just like a summary. And then what we'll do is we'll have we'll have this summary screen here, which will be a per card breakdown. So you'll be able to see what each card, like it's still going to be a summary, but all the most important information about what each card did is going to be surfaced there. So you can see that this fire number is just going up over time. So this is just more so to give you a good idea of like what your damage is, what your DPS is. I wonder, I mean, it should be trivially easy to sort of have like a DPS counter as well. Just kind of like, yeah. We could put like a DPS number here, as well as an enemy DPS number. But so like this is just going to be a very high level overview. And then, like I said, this second view here, this is going to have more detailed information about what each item did. Would also be nice not to scroll to see all of it. Yeah, I mean, the problem is there's no way to do that. Like there's no room anywhere on this screen for a big window, unless you want to put it like right here. But even still, that may not be enough room, depending on what these board sizes are, because like the player board could be really long. Could you do a tab on the left of the screen replacing the inventory? The problem is you can bring up this combat log outside of combat to see what your last combat was. So in this case, I would have to open my inventory and then open the combat log to see it. Why did you rework the map gen Slay the Spire format? Because the open world map was not compelling at all. It just wasn't working at all. Godot 4.7 is great. I switched to the beta for control offset transform. Yeah, I've been curious to play around with that as well. Hello, Dozy Burrito. So anyway, I'll spend more time working on this, but could be the same style of button not being contextual and the inventory being open. Yeah, I could play around with that. I don't know, we'll see. I don't want to do too much effort on the UX until I've like nailed down what I'm going to include. Okay. Anyway, so I've been working on or stubbing out this combat summary. This is going to have like a bar graph. So my intention is to have like all of your items listed with their relative damages. So the highest damage item will be at the top, and then it will just show like a little breakdown of like all the damage types that it did. But then everything will be relative to that item. So everything else will be expressed as a percentage of that item's damage. So your second most damaging item will be, you know, maybe it'll only be like 70% the length of that one or whatever. I don't know for sure. I'm going to have to break this down by damage and status applied as well. So that's what I mean. Like, we're just going to be playing around with this a little bit. Probably going to have to be laid out a little bit differently, but what are the assets drawn in? Sorry, I don't use Godot. I use Sprite for drawing my assets. Welcome, Stampa, by the way. The other thing is I don't know, I'm using like gradient textures for this. I don't know if I want to do that. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know. We're gonna have to figure something out here. One second. All right, sorry about that. I'm back. I'm thinking of the tier list of cards now. By the way, do we have cards tied to specific characters? No, that's not in the game. I suppose it's possible to do, but I just don't have any plans for that. I think the game, like the version of the playtest that you all played, is more or less how the final game is going to be, with the exception that I'm obviously going to fix all the UX issues, the balance issues, all that stuff, and add some more interesting items and maybe a couple of new encounters as well, but yeah, I think the playtest is a good representation of like how the experience of the final game is going to be, or the launch version of the game. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't add those kinds of things like post-launch, right, as like content patches and whatnot, but you know, I kind of have to be in this spot now where I'm like, what is a good version of the game to release? And I think we're basically, like, in terms of features and functionality, like, basically almost there. Thank you, Snubbill, for the IDR 10,000. Very much appreciated with the message yummers. Thank you, thank you. So I want to do, I'm just trying to think of like how I want to do this, because so we're going to need like, let's see. We're going to need like a damage. Oops. What the heck? And then I mean, this screen might just have to be a lot bigger. Honestly, I may want to... Let's see. I probably want to make this collapsible. So what I'll probably do is do something like this. And then we've got the title label. Let's get rid of this for now. This will go under the VBox container. So I have like the label here. Maybe we do some kind of like, I don't know. We do some kind of summary over on the right, and then I expand it. Something like that. Yeah, we may have to do like an expandable list or something. So I click on it, it expands, it shows the detailed breakdown. But then you can't see the bars relative to each other. Do I want to just make this screen like a lot bigger? Let's see. I'm gonna look at the Discord really quick. So one of the problems here is that there's just not a lot of room. There's just not a lot of room, but I think I will probably have to make this little window a lot bigger. I opened my Godot project like 3 hours ago and just left it without making anything. Any tips? Do I have any tips? I think you just gotta make, I mean, there's no like silver bullet tip. You just have to do it, you know? The Shia LaBeouf meme, just do it. Just do something, right? Just dedicate 15 minutes. Just tell yourself you're gonna do 15 minutes, and no matter how painful it is, no matter how much you don't wanna do it, just like do 15 minutes of work, do something, write a very basic script or a couple lines of a script or whatever. Just do that, and then if after 15 minutes you're still not feeling it, then you could stop. But I think what usually happens is like you get into something and then you get past the initial inertia, and then it becomes easier to just keep working. But, you know, I understand like not being in the mood or not feeling inspired or whatever, but if you just tell yourself, like I said, just 15 minutes, just force yourself to bite the bullet and do 15 minutes of work. And if you are still not feeling it after that, then, you know, you could stop there. But I think the big problem is the inertia, right? It's the getting started. Once you build up the momentum, it gets a lot easier to just continue. Shoot. Wonder if I should use a series of floating windows here. Oops. Yeah, I'm gonna re-stub this out. Okay, so if I do add child node, let's actually change this. Let's just do comment summary item. Okay, so we add a child node here. We want to do a label. This will be called like skeleton, warrior. Let's center this. Okay, and then we have, I don't know, I'm just gonna put a reference rect in here. I'll just put some kind of like border there. Okay, and then we do a VBox container. This is where we will get these texture rects. Put those there. Now there's gonna have to be 2 bars. One is gonna be the damage and one is gonna be the status applied. But maybe that works better. Now these are still a little bit too big. What if I change this? Maybe we want to make the max bar size like 100 or something. That might be easier. I can do 90. Yeah, actually that makes sense. If I make the max bar size 100 pixels, then it becomes really easy to express that as percentages. Okay, so we've got that. So what I'll probably want to do is I probably want like a grid container sitting up at this level. what did they do to the drag and drop of the nodes here? There we go. Okay. Grid container to, let's do another VBox container. This would be a side summary. And then we just duplicate a bunch of comment summary items. And then we duplicate this side summary, but this actually needs to be flipped now. Is there an easy way to flip that? What happens if I do, let's see. What happens if I use an HFlow container? VFlow container. Reverse. Oh, that's not quite what I wanted. So I'm actually going to have to do a flipped version of that. Anyway, this grid container, this side summary would go like that. Layout, we'll make this one expand as well. So I would flip this. I would mirror that for the enemy side. I wonder how easy that is to do. Let's try the new offset stuff. I mean, it's obviously gonna flip the text incorrectly, but if I just change this scale to -1, that will give us a better idea of what that looks like. Okay. So we have this kind of deal going on. And then what I can do is I can actually shrink this down a little bit, I think. Custom minimum size 400. We can make that a little bit more compact. This will sit like in the center of the screen here. And then you could click on individual things or hover over individual things. Yeah, honestly, maybe I just want another pop-up window. So you could like click on the skeleton warrior and that would bring up a new window, which would be like the overview for that particular item. That would make it hard to compare individual items though. It would make it hard to see like this item versus this item in terms of their DPS. Or what they applied and whatnot. I mean, I could just make this expandable, I guess. What I could do here is I could do a rich text label here. Oops, I'm typing in the wrong field. So it'd be like poison, damage dealt. So you could expand that bar there. This horizontal alignment, vertical alignment. This would need to be shrink begin. The question is that enough space? That should be enough space, I think. The other thing to consider too is that this is going to have to support controller as well, so I can't make this menu too hard to navigate. These bars can be a little bit more complex too, I think. I was thinking about, like, if I add another VBox container here, I put the text direct in here. Honestly, maybe this may be a good use case for the drawable textures, honestly. I might try that. Because what I was thinking of doing is I could put like a little legend here, so I could have like a a line coming up from this red section and then show like the blood icon or whatever, or the bleed icon, sorry, or the damage icon. And then like this section would have poison coming from it. So you could tell at a glance like what each of these segments of the bar are doing. I can't put the icon in the center because if like one section is really, really small, it won't render properly. Yeah, I don't know. Hello, Wuius, welcome. Hello, Rookie Tookie. Find a small thing to fix us first, yeah. Can't think of something, build something modular you can use for future projects? Yeah, like tinkering or prototyping. Do you happen to know why tweens don't cause transform notifications? I'm investigating this to make a very streamlined way to animate UI. It's very handy that it works like this, but it also kind of counterintuitive. Tweens don't cause transform notifications. For UI elements, I didn't even know there was a way to listen. Notification transform changed. Is transform notification enabled? Set notify transform. Interesting. I don't know. I've never actually used that. The Venom artifact was mean. Killed me at battle start. Sorry to hear that. I'm actually not sorry. This is one of those situations where I don't want to start like writing code until I've figured out generally how I'm going to display everything. What am I gonna do? Excuse me. I mean, I think the bars really here are the most problematic things here, because the problem is that I use the same color for multiple things. Like bleed and damage are the same thing. So these need to be labeled in some way. The other option is I just make it a single bar that just represents DPS or something, and then you can break it down further. Yeah, I really don't know what to do here. I have to make this clickable. I have to show all the breakdowns for that item. These bars have to be meaningful. Hmm. I don't necessarily want to pop out another window when I click on this because it makes it hard to compare things. Shoot, this is a hard problem. Hello, Mel's, welcome. What about a second panel at the side? Put like another panel here. That might work. Yeah, maybe this just becomes the overview. So we just do this view and then some general board stats down here. Then when you click, it opens up a second panel. Yeah, I just don't know how I'm going to... I don't know how I'm going to make this as useful as possible. Because like the whole point of having this detailed breakdown screen is that it's going to give you more detail. But as it stands right now, the only thing it adds is like these bars. It doesn't really actually tell you anything about what each card was doing. I mean, it gives you like the relative damage and status applications of each item, but I'm almost wondering if I should do a slightly different UX. I almost wonder if I should like almost duplicate the player board and just have, so you've got your board. You got your board, you go into your combat. You beat the combat. You have like a new button out here that's like a pop-out log. You click that and then it pops out a new UI, but your board is basically duplicated in that UI. And then what you can do is you can like hover over things to see their damage or click on things to see the damage. Of course, I would need to figure out how to put the enemy board in that screen as well. That might work though. I'm thinking, so if you imagine a whole screen like a dialogue popping up, put like the player board in the top left, put the enemy board in the top right, and then just make it so that you can click on things on the board to see a breakdown of the stats. Of course, then you wouldn't be able to see at a glance like which one did the most. You'd have to go hunt for a little bit. I really don't think... I really don't think these bars are going to be useful without labels for them. Unless I did something like label here. I don't know, we put like the poison icon here. Damage icon there. Whatever. Fire icon there. And the fundamental problem is like there's just not enough room on the screen. Like I can't pack the screen with information. Like look at this. There's 3 things here. Icon damage, icon damage, icon damage. That takes up like the entire width of the bar almost, right? So I can't display like a whole bunch of information. I have an idea of making a very simple resource with tween information and a lock. The idea is you set the resource, reparent, or remove the control, and it handles the animation itself. Oh, that sounds interesting. Have you ever had a bug that is so complicated that you changed your game to work around it instead of tackling it? I don't think so. Hover info if the battle info button is pressed. Yeah, maybe like a tooltip would work instead. I mean, here's the problem, right? Like, in order for this screen to be useful, I need to tell the player what this breakdown actually means. Tell the player what this breakdown actually means. Then when I hover the skeleton warrior, or select the skeleton warrior, I need to show the player like which item exactly that is. The name is not sufficient, right? Like if I have multiple skeleton warriors on the board and one is like juiced up from alchemy and one's not, I need to be able to show the player that this is the juiced up one. So I almost need to show like the item tooltip when I hover this, as well as whatever damage it did. Like the damage breakdown. Hi. I honestly don't even know if this bar chart display is going to be even that useful. Like, I almost want to simplify this even more. I almost want to do something like this. And then just basically show the stats of each item on hover. That might be better than a bar chart, because I think the player is going to know, generally speaking, which item of theirs was most powerful. I mean, maybe I could still show a bar chart or something. Like I could still do that view under. So if I do like a VBox container, and I paste that, you know, something like that. And then I can I mean, maybe that's the way to go. So you just show both boards side by side. I put some kind of like generalized overview underneath the board. But if you want to look at the specific item stats, you just hover over it and then it shows an extra tooltip or something. That may be the way to go, actually. I could even make it so that way, like, let's say that I keep these bar chart items. What I could do is I could divide this here. So put a scroll container below these so that the bar chart section scrolls. These things always stay locked to the top, these boards here. Scene paint mode. What is that? Anyway, so these always stay at the top so you can see them. And then if you're looking at the bar charts, for example, and you hover over the name of an item, it could just highlight that item in the board. So you know what item it's talking about, right? I mean, I could even just play that same tooltip, right? I could just hover over it, show the item tooltip here, show the stats tooltip over here. That might be the way to go. I do think it's going to be a lot nicer from a UX perspective if you can actually like see the boards. And just like interactively hover over the items, because that's just going to be a lot nicer, because you know, generally speaking, like which item is the most powerful. So being able to just go directly to it and hover it to see the stats, I think it's going to be good. But then just having like the relative breakdown, I think could still be helpful in that context. Yeah, we can give it a shot. Hello, Smile XFO, welcome. Good to see you. Okay, so this is all a mess, but what I'm going to do to start is... Why is it doing that? Oh, the VBox container. So what I'm going to do to start is, let's just see... I need to get the enemy board and the player board state changing or saving and displaying in this window, as well as getting this window to pop up when I click a button. So let's just get that much done. And then we can move from there to working on the tooltip that displays the per card breakdown, the per item breakdown. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because I do want that combat summary. So after combat ends, I want like another combat summary button here above the combat log. You click that, it brings up this window. The problem is this window needs to display the state of the boards as of the last combat, right? Because if I move things around and then I go, wait, I want to see what that was. I open the combat. That needs to capture the old board state, the board as it existed while I was in combat. There are ways to do that, but I think the other concern that I have is maybe that's going to that might present some tricky issues in terms of like absolutely recreating the board state. Maybe not though. I may be able to do that. Anyway. Let me see something. Where is this used? Yeah. One problem here is that the artifacts are not going to project their abilities onto that combat summary board. So that's going to be the tricky part, is like recreating this board with the exact same state. I may have to do... So I've got a duplicate method in here. Honestly, I may just need to create a duplicate method that just captures all of the transient state as well. So typically when I duplicate a card, I'm relying on the systems to regenerate all the transient data or the non-permanent data. So for example, with this artifact hands, this will add abilities to the items if certain conditions are met. So in order to get those conditions to show up in this version of the board, I would need to somehow bring those abilities over. As it stands right now, I'd have to recreate all the state of the game systems such that these get replayed onto items on that board. But I think what I could do is I could just create like a snapshot item, or I could create a snapshot method or something, which just captures everything, including the non-permanent state. And then just prevent any state updates from going on to that item. So that means that I would pull in, I would take all this. I would take the, I would duplicate the execution block, the buff, source, compose, contextual, compose, passive, projected. Probably bring over the cached flattened abilities as well. Maybe not, but I want to bring over the enchants, the composed abilities. I want to bring over the display name override. I want to take over all of these modifiers, all the temporary tags, the alchemization count, like everything. Even the data that's supposed to be like transient or temporary needs to be snapshotted. Why is it so difficult? Among Us. Hello, Among Us. What engine is this? This is Godot. Is this combat log for the player to look at or for you? It's for the player, yeah. So trying to make a combat log that's useful, that's not so noisy, easier to follow, easier to understand what's going on. It's just turning out to be kind of a lot of work, kind of a massive effort. Played a few CRPGs and their math is substantially easier, yet none of the ones I've seen did that well. Yeah, I think combat logs are just hard. I think because the fundamental problem is that if you just capture every single thing that happens and you show that to the player, it's like there's just going to be so much data. And so, like, the combat log, what I'm finding out is a lot more an exercise of, like, user or player experience rather than, like, capturing the data. Like, capturing the data is the easy part. I have all the data. But if in a combat, if I generate 5,000 events and I just output a line to the combat log for every event, it becomes really hard to, like, understand what's going on. So like if one of your items crit for a lot in like the middle of that combat, that's like 2,500 lines ago, right? So you want to know as a player, hey, like how impactful was this item? And how many times did it crit? And what values did it crit for? But if you've got to scroll through 5,000 lines to find that, that's just going to be impossible. Like there's no... Now, obviously, you could fix that by having like filters and stuff, right? You could have all of the events and then you could just say, you know, give the player the ability to filter by card and by damage type. So I'm trying to find a middle ground where it's like, I'm not trying to build a data dashboard where you can just do every query against the combat log that you want. But at the same time, I don't want to just like show the player every single event that happened because then it's not going to be understandable. So I need to come up with like a middle ground, which is surface the most useful information to the player on an overview basis, like how much total damage did I deal, how much total poison did I deal, but then also on a per card basis. Like if I'm interested in like how many times did this card execute, how many stacks of poison did it apply, right? How many times did it crit? What was the highest amount that it critted for, right? I think those are the kinds of things, like that's a nice middle ground where it gives you enough insight into what's happening without inundating you with a bunch of data that you may not care about. Maybe showing statistics might be better for your case. Think it better to explain things to player via tweens, effects, sounds, not a log. Right, the log is not for everyone. It's not, this is not going to be like a critical part of the game. Like the log is just going to be a nice feature. If you don't want to look at the log, you don't have to look at the log, right? Like when I'm playing my playtests, I almost never look at the combat log. The only time where I want to look at the combat log is if I see a massive burst of damage. I usually want to like pause the game and like look through the combat log and see why did that happen, right? That's personally only when I've ever found it useful. Make a game where you have to clear the combat log. Yeah, an incremental game where you have to work with the combat log. Good morning, Nathan-san. Maybe do it tab style like folders. Hello, Helkios Games. Welcome back. think the UI of the combat log and statistics for backpack battles does a really good job at showing relevant information. In backpack battles, you can filter the log. Yeah, the problem is backpack battles also has more screen real estate to work with. So like I can display a log like this, right? The problem is something like this takes up a significant amount of real estate on my screen. Screen real estate is the weirdest yet best word I've ever heard in development. Backpack Battles also stores all the match info in a SQLite DB, which is pretty neat. Yeah, that makes sense. So you're adding controller support. What made you change your mind about having it just be mouse controls? I didn't change my mind. The intent was always to add controller support. Unless I'm mistaken, maybe I forgot that I said that there wasn't going to be controller support, but as far as I can remember, controller support was always something I wanted to do. It just I didn't want to do it until later in development when my UI was largely in place. All right, I really don't know what to do with this combat log. Because I tried to do... So I experimented with doing that collapsible style, like with the backpack battles. The problem is this game just generates so many events. Like... You know, it's like I was using the number of like 5,000. Like, I don't think it's actually that unrealistic to hit like 5,000 events happening in a combat. That's probably not the majority case. I mean, it's very, very likely not the majority case, but that can happen. So I don't know. I have no idea what to do with this thing. Hello, Ninja Link. Good morning. I have no idea what to do with this thing. I don't know. All right, well... I really want to get this combat log done because it's just an albatross around my neck, but every time I take a stab at the combat log, it doesn't work. So... I don't know what to do about that. I'm really tempted to just be like, simplify the combat log to like just a general total overview and like that's it for release, you know? Like I don't... Part of me is like, this is just too much effort. But we'll see. I have to think on it some more. Another problem which I faced recently in my roguelike game and log system is the performance. I use pooling and divide the log with these timers, but I don't have so much info. Your case would be much worse. Yeah, I mean, I think somebody posted in the Discord about the auto resolve being extremely laggy, and I think it was largely because of all the events being generated. Like, you know, if you generate tens of thousands of events because you come up with a ridiculous build, and each one of those events generates a line in the log, that's another problem that has to be dealt with, right? So like the combat log is this incredibly like weird thing where you want to give the player enough information that they could look at. You're going to deal with performance issues if a lot of logs are coming in. It has to have controller support. So like if you want to do like on hover effects or whatever, like I need to have a UI that's easy to navigate with a mouse and a controller. It's just like, it's one of those things where it sounds easy, but it's just like difficult from every angle. The UX is difficult, the performance is difficult, and then also just making the information useful and easy to parse for the player is also difficult. So I really don't know what to do about it. I think total overview is exactly what I wanted, just a high level. This card did X much of X type of damage. Ignosum says, I don't think it's mandatory. Yeah, I mean, I may just go with... You know what I'll do, maybe... I think I'll just start building in this direction, and then I'll just see what happens. Because I think at a minimum... Like, at a minimum, I display a screen that shows the player board and the enemy board side by side, and as you hover over items, a tooltip pops up that just shows you what the overall stats were for that item. I think that could be like an MVP sort of approach to this combat log, and then I can evaluate from there how useful that actually is and what information I could add or remove from that. What are you trying to do with the battle log? I'm just trying to give the player a good summary of like what happened during the battle. But this direction is kind of exactly what I wanted. Yeah. I think that will be serviceable. I mean, so it's going to provide less information than the playtest combat log does. But again, the problem with the playtest combat log is that having a huge pile of information is not exactly that helpful when you have specific questions, right? Like having a huge pile of information is great if you want to get into super granular detail, but you almost need to add like filtering options to it. Whereas this is like, I'm kind of doing, like with this approach, I'm kind of doing an opinionated filter, right? I am saying as the developer, here's the most useful information that I'm going to surface to you, and all of that granular information is just not going to be available to you, right? And that could change in the future, obviously, but I think as like an end goal for the combat log, that could work. All right, well, let's just start building in this direction then, and we'll just see how it goes from there. So the first step is to just get the enemy and player boards replicating in this screen. And then, yeah, we can go from there. I felt that the combat log was difficult to look through to see what all was happening. The UI was small and so many things happened. Maybe making the text colors for the enemy and player. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem that we're trying to solve with the combat log is like, yeah, just trim down the amount of information that's shown, give enough information to the player where the combat log is helpful, but don't give so much that it's like you have to scroll past a bunch of irrelevant things, right? All right. I just want to run history and then post it on Discord for chat to shame me. Okay. All right. I'm going to be right back in just 3 minutes and then we'll start. We'll just start building this and we'll see what happens. But anyway, I'll be right back and we'll continue on. Okay, I'm back. Split the combat log, one for the player, one for the enemy. Players on the left and enemies on the right. Could make the combat log be able to maximize and minimize its size. Yeah, maybe. Does the publisher have Does the publisher have any influence on any game features you are making? No. I mean, well, influence is like, I don't know what you mean by influence, right? If my publisher says, hey, I think this is a problem with the game, then, I might take that into consideration, right? But as far as like the final say on like creative things, the game is fully under my discretion in terms of like what I work on and what I don't work on. So yeah, if you mean like, does the publisher have any like direct control? The answer is no. My last idea would be less info in the battle log on screen, but we could enter the pause menu and see last combat log in full. Perhaps it'd be useful to create some kind of hierarchy of information. Show in the log the most useful info and collapse the nitty-gritty things under each line, or even reduce explanations and just show the item perk influence on object. Hello, Wiseham. Saw your interview. 50K copies is a lot. Maybe. I don't think it's that much. Evan, by the way, do you allow save loading in a run? Yeah, there's a save system, yeah. Not a lot for this game, but a lot in general. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, Gunforged sold like almost 5,000 copies now, which, I feel like I could 10x that easily with Alchemortis. So I don't think it's that much. It deserves more than 50K, thank you. But I always see, oh, my game flopped, what's next? Well, I mean, it's one of those deals where it's like aim high, miss high, right? If I aim for 50K and I get 30K, it's like, that's still good, right? But yeah, we'll have to see. All right, anyway, so now we got to figure out how to get all this stuff into the combat, what did I call it? Combat summary. All right, so let's do player board, enemy board. Okay. Access those as unique names. Let's create a script for this. Okay. So if I go to my combat stats manager, this is the thing that's generating the report. So this combat stats report. What I need to do is I need an on combat ended. We'll do on combat ended, and what we'll do is we'll just do a deferred. Okay. All right, we're gonna do report, and we're gonna do this per card. So I'm going to do something like public void snapshot. And what I'm going to need is I'm going to need let's pass in the board inventory component, player board. Oh, let's do player inventory. Enemy inventory. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll do for each var card in player inventory dot get cards on board. So here's what I'm going to do for the base card. Where's duplicate? I'm just going to do a public base card. We're just going to return duplicate in here, but I'm just setting up the new method so I can just go in and update this later. Okay, so we're going to do report.snapshot, and we're going to need to get board manager is equal to this dot get board manager. Var player board is equal to board manager dot get player board. If player board is equal to null, return board manager. Oh, let's do this. Board manager get opponent board for board player board. This will be enemy board. Okay. If enemy board equals null, we will return. Okay, and then we're going to do player board dot board inventory component, enemy board dot board inventory component. Okay. So then in my combat stats report here, we're going to iterate over every card. We're going to say var stats is, let's just do this in here. Let's do public void capture stats for card, base card for card. Yeah, so what we'll do here is we'll do snapshot card is equal to for card dot snapshot. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say var card combat stats is equal to, well, actually, let's do this. Per card dot try get value for card out var card combat stats. If card combat stats is equal to null, we will just return. Okay, then we've got the snapshot card, so that's going to do the snapshot. So what we'll do is we'll do per card snapshot card is equal to card combat stats. Is this a record? I mean, that's fine, actually. We'll just set card combat stats dot base card is equal to snapshot card. Then we add an entry with a snapshot card to the per card with the card combat stats, and then we do per card dot remove for card. So what I'm essentially doing is when combat ends, all of this collected per card data is going to be associated with the snapshotted version of that card. So we're going to see for the card we want to capture the stats for. If it's not null, we'll snapshot the card that gives us a new instance, a new reference. We'll change the card combat stats.card to point to that snapshot card. We'll add an entry to the dictionary for the snapshot card that equals that modified object, and then we'll remove the original key. So that will basically give us new references to those base cards. And then what I can do in here now is I can do player.capture stats for card. So I'm going to iterate over all the cards on the board and call capture there. Okay, so that should create a nice little snapshot for us. Okay, so now we've got that report has been snapshotted, which means that anything that changes after the combat is over will not affect the data that's captured by the combat stats report. And I believe that should be called, yeah, it's being called here. Let's just do this. If report equals null, return. Okay, and then we'll just do report.snapshot there. Okay, I saw Gunforge on sale for like $3. Yes, go buy it. I would appreciate that. I mean, like, for example, I'm about to lose in a boss fight. Can I save and reload the game and adjust my strategy in a fight? I mean, you can, yeah. If you want to save scum a little bit, you can. Also, you get good player feedback and also some sort of forecast from playtests. That's true, yeah. Aim for 4 trillion then and get 2 billion. You missed by a mile, it still did well. That's true. Maybe I should do that. Hello, RN Genesis, welcome. You have like a naming rule to follow naming your namespaces. Hello, Logan BTGT. My namespaces just follow the directory structure. That's the easiest way for me to do it anyway. So game.ui.combat log. See how it's UI, so it's scripts UI combat log. I just omit the scripts. So the namespace is game, and then that's for all of my game scripts. That's the like a namespace that I use for everything. And then the next parts are like the subdirectories here. So UI combat log. That's how I namespace things. Just make it the same as the directory structure. Makes it nice and aligned, nice and predictable. We love combat logs, don't we, folks? Yes, we do. Actually, I'm starting to hate them. I'm starting to hate combat logs, but me in my absolute graciousness will suffer on behalf of my beloved players so that they can have the features that they want to see in the game. I will be self-sacrificing. I will give up everything. I will no lie for this code until you guys have what you want. That's just how generous I am. Oh, goodness. Anyway. So the next big chunk of things to do is to actually get this screen to render. So let's just create the code for this. So we got the load report here. We do need to do... We need to register this. I think that's correct. What am I missing? Oh, I need to provide the quick move priority. I don't know why that's a required field, honestly, but that's okay. Source board, player board, opponent board, enemy board. So we just want to register those opponent boards just in case. I wonder why that doesn't do a bi-directional thing, but I'm not going to change that. Let's just do another register opponent board call the other way. Am I doing that in my normal code? Oh yeah, I just call it. Oh, I also call it with the inventory. Interesting. This is like ancient code. I haven't touched this code in like probably like 7 months. Actually, I'd be curious to see. Oh, I did touch that. SFX. Okay, so the last time I touched it was 4 months ago. And it was just to rename this. Oh, was I right? Like, what was the last actually meaningful change to this method in particular? Oh, gosh. The last meaningful change to this method was 9 months ago. Anyway, that's not important, but just do a Todd and tell them to upgrade their PCs. Yeah. Thank you, glorious leader. Your kindness knows no bounds. Okay, anyway. Oh, you know what I just realized? I'm not storing enough information in the combat stats report. I also need to, let's see. I also need to get the board state. I'm also wondering, I probably should store this in here, actually. Yeah. Let's do this. We grab the board state there. So we basically just create a new dictionary from the current state, and we just create a snapshot value instead. And then what I can do is I can do for each var current card in current state.cards.values. Actually, for each var key, snapshot card is equal to captured board state key. capture board state.cards.key. Let's also do captured board dimensions is equal to 4 inventory.dimensions. We'll put a continue there. So grab the combat stats for that current card. Okay, did I do that right? So we grab the current state, we create a new captured board state with the exact dictionary, except all of the values are snapshots of the card. We set the dimensions, then for all of the positions in the current state.cards.keys, we grab a reference to the current card, we try to get the combat stats for that card, so that would be an entry in this per card dictionary. If it's null, we just continue, that's fine. Otherwise, we get a reference to the snapshot card. We change the reference in the card combat stats. We add a key for the per card combat stats, pointing to the snapshot card, and then we remove the current card. I think that's right. So then in here, all I need to do now is I just need to do player.capture stats for inventory, player inventory, capture stats for inventory, enemy inventory, and this snapshot should be called with non-null values, so that's fine. Honestly, we could probably make this one public as well. Okay. Anyway, so now in the load report, what I do is I do player board dot board inventory component dot set dimensions board inventory component. Thank you very much. Set board dimensions report dot player dot captured board dimensions. Player board dot board inventory component dot load set board state. Report dot player dot captured board state. And we do the same thing here. Report dot enemy. Okay. So now we've got the combat summary. This needs to be shown on click, but let me just do. I'm just going to commit that because I think that's a nice check-in point. I really don't like how they changed this. Okay, there we go. This is just going to be combat summary, toggle button. We've got the alchemy drawer here. This combat summary here. Why does this keep focusing? I didn't ask you to focus, bro. I didn't tell you to steal my focus. We'll worry about all this stuff later. Actually, I should probably change this type. Let's get rid of this. Let's add a margin container. And then we're going to make this the scene root. This is going to be full rectangle. This combat summary. Shrink center, shrink center. We'll reload that. This is now a margin container. Okay, so we've got the margin container. I will add like a dimmer rect here. That will be one of the things that I do, but for now, we're gonna add the combat summary. Load as placeholder. I just set that to invisible for now. Okay, so the drawer UI. Node private instance placeholder. Combat summary placeholder. And I do need the combat summary toggle button. Okay. Combat summary is equal to combat summary placeholder. If the report is null, we'll just return. Okay, combat summary, load report, report. If report is equal to null, or report dot player dot captured board state is equal to null. This code is not going to stay this way. I'll clean this up quite a bit, but I just want to get to the state where it's working. Combat summary dot visible. Okay, Let's add in here escapable component. Oops. Node private escapable component, escapable component. Escapable component plus equals, or dot escaped plus equals on escaped. It's fine. I don't need to clean this up just yet. Well, I guess there's only one thing to do. Let's test and see how much of that I got correct. Any tips on how not to get overwhelmed when the code base grows and grows? Organization is important. I think a lot of it is experience too. Like, the more you do programming, the more you build games, the more you understand how to like properly silo and modularize systems. So like, it's like I'm in a situation with Alchemortis where if there's a bug in the game, I generally know which system the bug is isolated to, and I can go in and fix it. Or if I want to add a new feature, it's the same deal, right? Like, I know which parts of the code base that feature is going to be relevant for. So yeah, it's just, you know, it's one of those things where you'll get better at it with experience, but at the same time, you know, you're probably going to end up with situations where it becomes unmanageable while you're building that experience. Because it's like, that's the thing about experience, right? Like, the experience is only going to come when you figure out how not to build things and how to build things. But I think the most important thing is like, yeah, just focus on making your system sort of modular enough, like that they have clear responsibilities. And when the elements of your game, all of your scenes, whatever, when they have clear responsibilities, you kind of naturally just build a system that's intuitive and also fault tolerant as well. So like, when you come up across a bug that's happening in a properly modularized system, usually that bug is isolated just to that system, right? It doesn't have any broader impacts on like how the rest of the game is working. But the same is true of features, right? When you want to implement a new feature, if everything is properly siloed and properly has like clear defined responsibilities, then you know, like, yeah, there might be 1,000 files in the project, but you know that this feature is only really going to need to touch like 2 or 3 of those, right? And if it's the case that it's not going to touch only 2 or 3 of those, if it's the case that you just want to add some new content to the game, but you're discovering that like 10 different files need to change, then that might be a case where you say, okay, how can I more properly generalize this, right? How can I more properly make it so that way the end state of me adding a new piece of content is like very narrow in terms of the scope of the changes it makes to the project. Of course, that's like, you know, that's all easier said than done. All right, let's see. Hell yeah. I mean, heck yeah. Oh, that's not good. Oh, those all got duplicated onto my board. That's fun. I didn't add drag locks, but you could see... Oh, it's not working anymore. Probably because I destroyed a bunch of stuff. Right. Okay, so there's a couple of problems here. It's almost working. Couple of problems here, though. Player board. Actually, I wonder... We set these as virtual. Player board. So setting a board as virtual means that it won't manage any card life cycles. And I also think, if I'm not mistaken, it blocks the signals. Yeah. Oh, that might not actually be good. Never mind. I can't block the signals. So the next best thing to do then is just to do player board, board inventory component.clear board, enemy board.board. I think this is a flaw. Like I was just talking about properly like systems with proper responsibilities. I think this is actually a flaw. So the way that this board inventory component works is that if the board inventory component gets freed, it will also free any of the cards that are on it, unless it's marked as virtual. A virtual board is one that is a pure data board, where I may be putting cards on the board in the background in an invisible way to get some data about the card configurations or whatever. And a virtual board doesn't emit signals either. So it's basically just becomes a data container for like certain card layouts. I think I'm using the virtual board to determine the displacement, because I think what happens is I create a virtual board in the background and then I try to do a bunch of displacements against that virtual board. And then when I find a valid displacement, I report that back to the actual board. So that's a case where a virtual board is helpful, but I just generally don't think like it probably shouldn't be the board inventory component's responsibility to free any cards that exist on it when it gets freed. And also, I don't even know if this is necessary anymore, because this was a problem when I was not using the rendering server, I think. Oh no, wait. Yeah, so this actually is good for the rendering server, because this destroy will free up all those RIDs from the rendering server, I think. Yeah. Although it also does that on notification pre-delete as well. So this may not actually even be necessary anymore, but it would still be the case anyway that whenever I free a board inventory component, all of the cards on that board get freed as well. But anyway, I'm not going to mess with that because it's all working. But anyway, what I need to do to ensure that the cards don't get deleted when the board gets deleted is I need to clear the board first. And clearing the board just removes all of the data from the board. So that's all that does. And then I need to add board drag locks. So add drag locks for board, or is it this .get mouse events manager? I don't like how this system works either, but again, it's one of those situations where it works and I don't want to mess with it. About a week since taking your advice, have a fully playable prototype for a game I literally no idea how to make. I'm sure you don't even want the credit, but I'm glad I was there to ask. Awesome. Glad to hear that. Very, very cool. Who's the big buff skeleton? That's the skeleton commander. Don't cross him. Little Robot Games. Hello, Godot. Yes, indeed. Welcome, welcome. Miller Byte, I've been using pure C# events instead of signals. Does that seem like a chance that will bite me? I can't leverage the editor to track subscribers, but I did rather manage that in code anyways. I don't think there's a problem with it. You know, I think, like for me personally, I don't like to use parallel redundant systems if I can help it. So like I just always use the Godot signals because it's just like the one observer system that everything is using. That said, there are situations in this code base where I had to use events, and so I'm mixing and matching them anyway, but I don't think that there's no downside to that. The only downside would be you've got two observer systems that are working in parallel and they work slightly differently, right? And so the only way that would get you is that like, you know, the difference in how they behave makes your code a little bit unpredictable. But honestly, I don't even know if that's true because I'm trying to think like the only thing that signals do differently compared to C# events is like you can set a signal, for example, to be a deferred handle or a one-shot handle where it will either be handled on the idle frame or it will be only emitted once. But otherwise, I think they behave almost exactly the same, right? Like when you emit a signal, all of the signal listeners are immediately called right then and there. That's the same is true for events. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's probably a low chance that something is gonna bite you, as you say. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a problem with it. Nice. Okay, so now let's do this. Can't drag these things. Got the training dummy. We close that, open it back up, close it, open it, close it, open it. So now if I move these cards out of here and I open that combat log, you can see that this has a snapshot of my old board. So that it's storing the old combat configuration and not my current combat configuration, right? And so now if I change this board layout and I go into combat again, and then I open this, now I've got the new setup. And this is really important, right? Because I could go and sell these things. Like I'm not guaranteed that any of those references are going to still exist. So that's another reason why snapshotting that and duplicating those items was really important. Now, the problem here, though, is that, let me just do this. Add item, skeleton, mage, add item, repeat. Check this out. Skeleton, mage, 1000. Boom. All right, so if I add, for example, if I add the skull wand, so all my minion crit chance is 25% here. So if I go into combat again, I do this, I go to my inventory, these have a 10% crit chance. So the problem is that the artifacts are not applying to this board. And that's why I need to actually, when I snapshot that card, I actually need to capture all of the transient data as well. So what the duplicate does is it just duplicates all the base data, all the quote unquote permanent data, right? What abilities does it have? Like what natural abilities does it have? So that excludes projected abilities, artifact added abilities, etc. Like what abilities are actually like native or natural to this card? And then also what enchants are on it. Now it does duplicate the temporary tags, which is interesting. My GitHub credentials are either invalid or expired. Okay, we'll ignore that. Events let me define custom delegates. Can't remember signal support custom delegate signatures. They do. The other downside of Godot signals, though, is that only variants, so the Godot variant type, only variants can be signal arguments. And a variant is basically any type that the C++ side of Godot can understand, right? So that's how it does like the marshalling and unmarshalling between C# and the C++ side. And so if your type cannot be represented as a variant, you can't use it as a signal argument. So like a pure C# class, an instance of a pure C# class cannot be a signal argument. It will fail because Godot doesn't know how to marshal and unmarshal that data. So in order to get your C# class to be a variant type, you need to extend Godot object or extend something that ultimately extends Godot object, right? And so the common way to do it is to extend ref counted. So you have your C# class Maybe it's just a data transfer object or whatever. It's just a class that's designed to hold data that can be sent via Signal to all the listeners. That has to extend ref counted so that it can be marshaled and unmarshaled by Godot. And then the ref counted is necessary so that the Godot side reference gets freed when there's no more references to that thing. With C#, you don't have any of those problems, right? You can just emit whatever C# instance or type or value you want in an event, right? So that might be a good case. Like if you have a lot of custom C# objects and you really don't want to like force them to be ref counted and interact with the Godot API in that way, then events are a good option for that as well. I've been using almost exclusively C# events with exceptions for signals I want to call on animation players. Basically no problems for me. Yeah, I have a feeling it's probably okay. Okay, so what we'll do is we will do this. Can you stop telling me? Okay. So let's do this. Var dupe is equal to duplicate. Of course, this is read-only. Why does this keep popping up? Oh gosh, that's annoying. You know what I may need to do here? Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna fix this. All right, so I went through all the rigmarole of re-authenticating on GitHub for that extension, and then it just told me, oops, didn't work. So that's great. We'll just disable that extension for now. Okay, anyway. So the problem here is that this get all composed abilities list is dynamically fetched, but I kind of feel like this could be cached actually, which may break a lot of things, but that's okay. So I'm actually going to change this. Let's change this to cache all composed abilities. This will actually just be nice because I'm rebuilding this list like every time. And I don't think that's necessary. So we'll get rid of that. This top level composed abilities. So what we're going to do is we will do private read-only list, base composed ability, all cached composed abilities. So create that list down there or up there. Has ability with tag, we'll change this to all cached composed abilities. Okay, so down here, where am I at? So cache all composed abilities. What we'll do is we'll just do cached. Let's do this. Okay. Dot clear. So we clear it and then we just rebuild that cache list. And we actually don't need to return anything here. Okay. So then down here, what we do is before we rebuild the ability tree, we cache all composed abilities, and then we say all cached composed abilities in there. Did I initialize that as an empty list? I did. Okay, so that's good. Okay. This would be all cached composed abilities. Probably want to cache this as well. Actually, that's probably fine. It's already cached. That's not building anything dynamically. It's just going to the ability tree to look for that. Okay, anyway. Dupe dot all cached composed abilities. Add range. All cached composed abilities dot select x dot duplicate. We're going to need to call this again. Skip cache rebuild equals false. Maybe I'll do this. dupe.rebuild ability tree. We're going to skip the cache rebuild. So we're basically copying over all of the abilities and then just rebuilding the ability tree without rebuilding the ability cache. So we're basically just taking the cache and copying it over. Okay. Dupe sell price modifier is equal to the other thing that I'm realizing too. I am going to need to prevent resetting those modifiers. Anyway. So I think we captured all the modifiers. I'll have to double check this. This probably won't be correct, but I'm mostly interested in the contextual composed abilities as well. So I may have missed one or two things. I will go over this with a more in-depth look, I guess, but so now I need a way of getting the composed or the cached abilities. You know what I just realized too? This buff sourced composed abilities. Oh, and the projected composed abilities. So this cache actually needs to be rebuilt during combat because these projected composed abilities are changing. So I actually need to account for that. So maybe contextual abilities. I almost wonder if I can get rid of this contextual composed abilities, but I won't worry about that just yet. Okay, anyway. Okay. So that's good. I think the boatman is going to be a problem. Rebuild ability tree does rebuild the cache. So really the only problem is like if the abilities change during the execute, so during combat, previously this was just always fetching the most recent set of abilities. But now the problem is like, oh, it is calling rebuild ability tree after the full execution. Wait a minute. Can projected abilities echo? I think there's a couple problems here. Actually, how does echo work? I guess projected abilities can echo. Oh, maybe not actually. No. Yeah, maybe not actually. No, it definitely can. Is that fine? Anyway, I'll worry about that later. But this cache is actually not a problem because what will happen is when the projected composed abilities get removed, it rebuilds the ability tree, which rebuilds the cache. So it should be fine. And then anytime a projected ability is added, it rebuilds the ability tree. Now I could further streamline this by just I don't need to necessarily rebuild the whole ability cache when that happens. I could just add the ability to the cache. I still need to rebuild the ability tree. But I think in these cases, I could add the ability to the cache automatically and then skip the cache rebuild here and just rebuild the tree. Anyway, those are minor improvements that I could make, but you guys think that the devil wins in the song The Devil Went Down to Georgia? No, I don't think so. Nope. Okay. Actually, you know what? I don't think any of this is a problem now that I'm looking at it, because the cache is being rebuilt anytime those abilities are added. I think the buff sourced composed abilities also probably, because when the buffs expire, it rebuilds the ability tree. So I actually don't think any of these to-dos are... Basically, the way I have it set up is anytime the ability tree is rebuilt, which is already happening correctly, it also rebuilds the cache. So it should always be up to date. So I actually don't need to worry about that stuff. The only thing that needs to be handled is probably this, because if a buff is added in a deferred manner that adds a new ability, that's an existing bug though. So what I would probably do is like var should rebuild is equal to false. Put should rebuild to true here, and then should rebuild equals true there, and then oops, rebuild ability tree of should rebuild. I think that's fine. Anyway. But he gets Johnny to show pride and greed. The thing about that, though, is that it's not prideful to recognize that you actually have talent, right? Like, the song very obviously makes clear that he's really, really freaking good at playing, what is it? The fiddle, right? So it's not prideful to say, hey, I'm really good at this, and for that to be an accurate assessment. Greed, maybe. Maybe greed. Okay, get all cached composed abilities in the card inspector. I don't know, I hope I didn't break anything. Okay, let's go ahead and run, see what happens. Interesting perspective. Anyway, looks like you're solving some bugs, yeah. So it looks like I didn't break anything too bad. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add artifact minion crit chance. So that should have triggered, yeah, that triggered an update. So now if I do, okay, so this is actually working. No, it's not working. Oh, that's not undead. That's why. 2.1, 2.6. Okay. So these have 2.1 second cooldowns. And they have 25% crit chance. So if I go here, it didn't work. Oh, right. Because there's still a problem where the board manager is... The board manager is resetting the combat modifiers. Okay. Close to the right. All right, anyway, I'm going to take a quick 3-minute break. When I come back, we'll continue on for a little bit longer. I really want to get at least a good chunk of this like flowing well. I am a little bit worried about this change that I made to the cached composed abilities here, but I think that's okay. I think it's going to be all right. But I've been wrong before. Anyway, so I'll be right back in just 3 minutes, and we will continue on with this. All right, I'm back. Oh, right. So the board manager Now, what in the heck? Board registration, here we go. Public bool, prevent, contingent, state clear. Okay, and then we go up here. Board to board registration, a try get value. If not registration dot prevent contingent state clear, we'll do that. If registration is not equal to true, and then if registration ignore contingent state updates is equal to true, return there. I don't think I need this. I don't need this anymore. Okay. So now in my combat summary, I would do prevent contingent state clear, prevent contingent state clear. Okay, now hopefully that works. Johnny claims he is the best fiddler there ever was. This is a non-falsifiable claim and must therefore be a boast. Maybe, but that kind of colloquial exaggeration is used all the time to proclaim that simply that you are among the top ranks or something is among the top ranks of something. Like if you really pressed Johnny and you said, if I put you up against every violin player in the entire world or fiddle player in the entire world, you would be the best. Maybe he'd say, well, no, like not absolutely everyone, but like you'd be hard pressed to find somebody better than me. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you can't take exaggeration, hyperbole a little bit. You can't take it too seriously. You know what I mean? Okay. So this is a 2.1 second cooldown, blah, blah, blah. Boom. Okay, we open this up. 2.1 seconds, 25% chance. Yes, indeed. Okay, so now let's make sure that the artifacts work. Add artifact hands. If your board contains only weapon items. Okay, so Hands of the Fallen echo, Hands of the Fallen. Okay, so Hands of the Fallen echo, we go here. I bet you didn't think you would be pondering the repercussions of the devil went down to Georgia. Gonna have to get the Lord to weigh in on this. I hear he's an expert on such things. I mean, there's another question too, if you want to get really into it. Oh, I got a legendary chisel. There's another question too, is like, is there really such thing as being prideful in front of the devil? You know what I mean? Like if your quote unquote pride is causing you to oppose the devil, is that actually prideful? There's another angle for you, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this. Yeah, we got Hands of the Fallen there. Although, why is that duplicating the ability twice now? That is an interesting point. Anyway, I love how we're just like deeply analyzing this song. Unfortunately, I feel if I continue that train of thought, we'll end up in a discussion about religion, which no one wants. Yeah, I mean, it's just a fun, lighthearted thing. Obviously, it's just a song, right? Okay. So something is happening that's causing these abilities to be double duped. I might just have to rewrite. I don't know if I even want to use this anymore. Oh, maybe I just need to do dupe dot. Yeah, maybe just dupe dot all cached. Wait, what's happening here actually? Right. It's being rebuilt up here. And then I'm adding more abilities on top of it. But I actually need to clear this list first and then add the range. I probably want to call like set base tier again. So there's a lot of like wasted effort in here. So maybe I just literally copy and paste this. Or maybe I create like a duplicate helper that does like all the shared stuff, and then I can control when the ability tree gets rebuilt and all that stuff. Anyway, I think it's largely working though. Do you know how much of the game will be? I mean, yes, we, discussing with my publisher, what is a good price point for the game. But that is not ready to be revealed yet, sorry to say. I mean, what I can say, though, is like, this very obviously fits into a particular genre where games already exist in the genre. So, like, what I will say is that you should expect this game to be priced, like, in the sort of, like, normal range of the price you'd expect from this kind of a game, right? Like, it's not going to be $60. I'm pretty sure I can say that without being without running afoul of any reveal. It's not going to be $60. It's not going to be $100. It's also not going to be 99 cents. You know what I mean? It's like, anyway. I think it's time for me to do the playtest. I've only been watching for months without trying it. Yeah, let me know what you think. 250. Okay, apply to fire 25%. Okay, so now if I go here, okay, awesome. And I'm gonna try add artifact, hands. So we get rid of all these again, sell this. Pricing games is weird. Yeah, it can be. Okay, so we got Hands of the Fallen, Hands of the Fallen. If I open this now, yeah, look at that. Hands of the Fallen. It's got the 30% crit chance. Yeah, so that's got a 20%. Yeah, so all this data is being preserved now. So I'm basically just copying over all of the state directly to this. So just trying to capture all the state of the card. So yeah, I think that makes sense. I think we're good. Yeah. We've got the combat log here. This needs to be improved a little bit, but okay. So I think the next step here, obviously this is not very pretty yet, but I think the next step would be to show show the stats on hover. So I would show maybe like another tooltip window. Now the problem is, what happens if both tooltips end up being scrolled? So yeah, this is the part, like, I've got this part down now. So now I just need to figure out how to actually display the buy card stats. It could either be on hover, or I could require that you have to like click it to open up the summary or something. Yeah, because there's a question: what happens if both of the tooltip windows are scrollable? I mean, the other thing I could do is I could just put the stats into this tooltip as part of the scroll, but that would be, I think that would be a little bit noisy. I wonder if, yeah, maybe clicking it would just bring up like the card stats down here. And then if you click it again, it goes back to like the overview stats or something. I think we're getting there. Intro offers are huge. Even with me, I find it hard paying without seeing the green sale. Just raw on price. Of course, the game buying no matter what. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Make it $1 billion now. Big risk even making over $100 for my card to decline. This game determines his future. Yeah, it's of course it's a little bit dramatic, but it is true. Like, if Alchemortis doesn't do well, then I'm gonna have to go back into the normal workforce. So this is kind of like Alchemortis is kind of like a make or break moment. If it just doesn't do that well, then back to the 9-to-5 job for me. You got it in the bag, bro. I hope so, but I'm going to try not to think about that too much and just focus on making the game as good as it can be for release, and then we'll see what happens. I look forward to saying I watched your rise. Thank you. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Did I leave any to do in here? Let me see. Did I leave any to-dos hanging around? Looks like it's just that one. Oh wait, does it not show the to-dos in the diff? Okay, well that's still the case that this is the only to-do here. Okay. All right, so that's good. Anyway, that's going to be it for the stream today. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for being here. The Alchemortis playtest is still available, so you can head on over to the Steam page, click the request access button down here. I would appreciate your feedback and support. And what else? I think that's it. Yeah. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.